Hi, I'm Elliot Simmons and welcome to this lecture called Benjamin Bloom's Impact on the Academic World, alternatively known as Bloomin Dogs. So, an elephant was walking down to the river to get a drink, and as the elephant bent down, a turtle swam up to him. And the elephant kicked the turtle and it flew to the other side of the bank and it smashed to pieces and died. A giraffe walking by said, "What did you do that for?" And the elephant said, 56 years ago on this very day, I came down this very river and that very turtle came up and nipped me on the end of my trunk. I've got turtle recall. Yeah, but enough of that. Enough of that. It's a great joke, but what are we actually talking about here? Well, what are elephants famous for? Well, they're famous for having a good memory, but our elephant didn't want to be famous for just having a good memory. Our elephant wanted to be more than just knowledge, which you'll see at the bottom of the screen here. Our elephant wanted to be famous for working its way up through the cognitive hierarchy, through comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, until finally the highest level of cognitive ability, which is evaluation. And what our turtle didn't realize is that our elephant didn't realize was that he was actually thinking about Benjamin Bloom. And here we see Benjamin Bloom, and Benjamin's got a lot to answer for, because Benjamin Bloom back in 1956 was an educational psychologist who came up with a classification system of different forms of intelligence. And these different intelligences were cognitive, psychomotor, and affective. Cognitive being your mental skills or knowledge, psychomotor being manual or physical skills, some people are more clever with their bodies, and affective intelligence, which is more commonly known as emotional intelligence today. But seeing as we're actually talking about writing essays here, we're very much in that cognitive field of mental skills. And these are the steps that we saw the elephant going up through knowledge, which is the foundation, the lowest form of intelligence, up through understanding, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. And these are all very, very big words. And one of Benjamin's students, Lauren Anderson, came along later and said, well, if we turn the triangle upside down and say that the bottom of the pyramid is just remembering, the ability to be able to recall, which you know from my brilliant turtle joke, and then working your way up through understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, until the highest form of mastery is when you're actually a creative expert in your own field. Again, all very well and good to actually look at the Bloom's taxonomy and the cognitive hierarchy in this way. What does it actually mean for you? Well, what it really means is that the academics did go along, had these 6 steps, which you'll see across the top here, from knowledge all the way through to evaluation. And what they did was they actually put different words at different levels. So we see list and identify here next to knowledge. We see describe and classify next to comprehension, until all the way up the top we have words like judge. Now, academics will use these words aligned at different levels of testing. So if you're being tested at level 3, you're mainly going to be in this kind of area, level 5 here, and level 7 right at the top. But it's absolutely key that we understand what the command words are that you are going to be asked while writing these essays. And for level 3, you're going to have a lot of describe, explain, and identify. And at one question in 8600-300 criteria 3.1, you also get evaluate. Now, it's not just me telling you that you must find these words and understand exactly what they mean. This is what the ILM say. Assessors, tutors, and learners must examine the verb used in the assessment criterion. The reason why people go wrong when they're answering these essays is that they don't answer the question. They don't meet the needs of these different words. So what I've given you here is lots of definitions of the command words from the University of Leicester. That's actually a joke slide, and I needed the canned laughter again because there's a lot of detail there. So what we've done for you is actually broken it down into a much clearer way of understanding what identify, describe, explain, and evaluate mean. And you can read that at your leisure. But we must make sure that when we are asked a question, we meet the needs of those command words. And we'll be looking at individual questions in a little while. So what I want to do is have something which is a little bit entertaining called Bloomin Dogs, as a way of being able to assess your understanding of these command words as it stands now. So if you were asked to just list the parts of a dog, what would you do? It seems pretty obvious, doesn't it? You're being asked to list, that's the command word. So if you're being able to list the parts of a dog, we're looking for plurals here. So you're asked to list, you just have to provide us with a list. If you are asked to identify the parts of the dog, you are not actually asked to go out, find a picture of a dog and point to the different elements. Identifying is taking that list from the section before and adding a little bit more detail. It's not as much as the command word outline or describe, but you're giving more information. So if you're asked to identify, it is not sufficient merely to list. You have to give a little bit more information. So what happens if you were asked to describe the tail of the dog? Describe is a command word which is going to come up a lot in your assignments. So describing is more than outlining or identifying, and you're giving a lot more detail. And if you're asked to give a describe command word response, then it's very, very important that you weave in a real example. And here we see in image 1 a two-tone dog tail with a distinct curl to the right. The fur is soft, fluffy, and very clean. We've given more detail. So what happens if you get asked to explain? Well, explain is going into even more depth, and we must start getting quite technical here. This is where most people fall down at level 3. So we're way beyond describe, and we're going into detail about real facts and pieces of information that are going to show depth of thinking. So we might want to talk about the actual structure of a dog's tail, how electrical impulses are sent from the brain to cause a response. There are muscles and ligaments in place, and actually it's not just wagging when happy. There are other emotions that can be displayed as well. What happens if you get asked to assess? Well, assess is very interesting. It's not describing or explaining. You're actually building an assessment of a particular dog. So you need an example that you're going to assess. And here we see a nice blue-eyed boy. And what you really need is a criteria. There are 3 elements that must be in place. A criteria, and luckily with dogs we have the Westminster Kennel Club who have created that criteria for us. They tell us what a Siberian Husky dog should be with its tail. It should be well furred, of round fox brush shape, set on or just below the level of the top line, and usually carried over the back in a graceful sickle curve. The other thing that you need when doing an assessment is a scoring system. I don't care what your scoring system is, but I need to see that there is one. So I'm going to say I'm just going to assess this dog's tail on a scale of 1 to 5, and it will be subjective. It will just be me giving my opinion against that criteria. So here are the criteria, here are the scores that I gave it, and that enables me to lead to a conclusion. Therefore, I assess this Siberian Husky dog as being okay to good, as having an average score of 3.5. But these are the 3 elements which must appear. You have to have your criteria, which can just be a list, or you could describe the things within it. You have to have your scoring system, and you have to come to a conclusion. It's quite straightforward. You're going to get evaluate options. So here we have evaluate the tails of a range of Siberian Husky dogs. The usual difference between evaluate and assess is the number of things that you're actually going to be judging against the criteria. So here with evaluate, we have 4 dogs' tails. We're going to still use the same criteria, it's still in place, and we can still use exactly the same scoring system of 1 to 5. There it is. So we've got a table, we've got the dogs, and here we can see that tail 4 is obviously the best at a near perfect standard against that criteria, with me judging it. So what happens if you're asked to judge? Well, we have to judge this range of Siberian Huskies. Here we see a range of dogs. The judge is actually going to be assessing all of those component parts which were in the original list and come to a conclusion to say that this dog is the best dog. And of course what we can see there is that his tail isn't right. So what is absolutely perfect about this dog? It's every other component part. Right, so what happens when we actually start delving down into the essays and the way that they set it out? Well, each essay has got a code, 8600, 300, 309, 319 and 323, and they will all have learning outcomes. And you can look at my separate videos about them and each identifiable assessment criteria. What we will always see is that on the left-hand side of the paper, you've got the learner will know how to do something. And on the right-hand side, the learner can. And these are the actual questions that you've got to answer. And here we have 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3. And again, you will see the command words and you'll be able to find out how many marks each one of them is worth. The thing to really remember is that you must answer the question exactly as it states. If you're asked to identify potential areas of underperformance in the workplace, then we're going to need to see more than one. It's areas, and you're going to have to at least identify. It's okay to describe, it's okay to explain those potential areas. It is not okay to merely list or state. If you look at question 4.3, you're asked to describe actions to restore performance to acceptable levels. If you explained one action, you would be referred. You have to do a minimum of 2, and both have to be described. Just as a point here about word counts, it is not a word count, it is a word guide. So you can answer the questions usually in that word guide. If you answer with more, it doesn't matter. I will mark them all. I'm not going to stop marking. Let's look briefly here at 8,600, 300, solving problems and making decisions, learning outcome 3. And again, you can refer to an individual video about that one. But this is interesting because we've actually got very clearly labeled the fact that we have 24 marks available, and it's an evaluate question. So you know that it's going to be in depth. And it does tell you on the left-hand side the things that you have to do. You have to evaluate the possible solutions using a criteria and end up by stating your chosen solution clearly and concisely. It breaks my heart when people fail this question because they haven't clearly concluded what the best option was. Remember, the learner will, the learner can. It's what you have to do on the right-hand side in order to meet the criteria. And the reason why evaluate is such a hard question, as Benjamin would tell you, is that you actually have to create a criteria to score against. You're going to have to come up with that criteria yourself, describe how you allocate the scores, illustrate your scoring in a chart, and state the best solution. So you're using lots of different levels of the cognitive hierarchy. Something that I'm going to advise you all to do in absolute detail is look at the mark sheets that we give you. The mark sheets make things even clearer, although they're using the same sort of language, where it's going to show you what's going to constitute as a referral, where you haven't met the criteria, if you meet the criteria correctly with a pass, and what you can do to make a good pass, even though you'll just get a pass, you might get a score which constitutes a good pass. It tells you what to do. And again, you know, I find this very interesting that if you weight your options, actually say that some of the criteria are more important than others, you're going to get extra marks. If you actually use your criteria and describe the elements of the criteria rather than just listing or identifying it, you're going to get extra marks. So just a bit about the rules and regulations. When you are ready to officially submit the essay, it must be sent to ilm@jarroldtraining.co.uk. Before you send it to there, I'm very happy to look at drafts and can give feedback. When you actually save your essay, and I cannot state this clearly enough, there is a naming convention for the file name. So when you save it, you must put the unit code, which is either 8,600, 300, 309, 319, 323, your name, and then the word submission in capitals. This is because it's going to be able to be picked up by the ILM as well as ourselves to mark. The essays must come with a cover sheet, which will be sent to you electronically, and you can put your candidate number, registration number on that, and the unit code there, and the date that you actually submit it. Just something about plagiarism. Plagiarism is a serious issue in the academic world. I've seen many of these essays many times before, and of course ILM level 3 essays are available on Google. Don't do that. We do use scanning software, and I'll be able to recognize whether or not it's your own words. And I have a great deal of fun in actually finding that out. It's perfectly okay to quote. Make sure that you do give reference to anybody that you do quote, but you're not asked to use Harvard referencing. And just as a final thing, it's good practice to put your name and page numbers on it, because we do have to print it out in hard copy, and I will be annotating and marking with a green pen to make sure that all the criteria is met. Thank you very much for listening, and good luck with your ILM assignments.